Welcome, students, to the first chapter of Human Anatomy and Physiology. This chapter will be an introduction to the terminology that we use to study A&P, as well as some of the underlying kind of principles that we use as we move through our study of the human body. One of the things I like about this particular textbook is it starts each chapter off with this nice little kind of framework displayed here in the flow chart. It will give you an overview of what each chapter will cover, as well as what each section of each chapter covers, and kind of how the chapter flows through the information. So it's a really good place to start as you begin your reading and as you begin your look at each chapter in the book. Because it does kind of give you that nice broad overview of, oh, hey, this is what I'm going to cover in this chapter. And it's all nice and kind of visually appealing as well, so it's not like a big giant block of words. The other reason I like this textbook is they start off each chapter with a little Why This Matters video relating the content of the chapter to the healthcare field and to the more kind of practical applications. And since most of you guys are going to go into being healthcare professionals, I always find these videos quite useful.
Welcome to the study of the human body. Chances are that you are taking this course as your first step towards a career in the medical field. So some of my fellow clinicians and I are going to come along on this journey with you. We'll introduce you to each chapter in this book, and we'll explain how you'll apply this material in your future career. This first chapter will serve as your orientation to the human body, covering topics like the language of anatomy, also known as anatomical terminology. As a healthcare professional, it is very important for you to understand terminology like anterior, or the front side of the body when in anatomical position, versus posterior, or the back side of the body in anatomical position, and proximal, which is the closest to the center of the trunk of the body, versus distal, which is the furthest away from the body trunk. You will use these terms every day. For instance, when a patient presents with a wound, you will use anatomical and directional terminology to document the size and placement of the wound in order for the medical team to properly treat it. And you would be able to do this and many other crucial tasks because you have a thorough understanding of anatomical terminology. So let's dive into this chapter and start you on your path towards a rewarding career in healthcare.
So we're going to start with some basic definitions, starting off with just defining what it is that you are going to be learning in this class: anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is the study of the structure of the body. So we're going to look at where organs are located, how they relate to each other, what they're composed of, what kind of materials do we find in them, what ducts maybe come out of them, what organ is in front, the shape of the organ, etc. How many lobes, for instance, are in the organ, etc., etc. When you study anatomy, it's a lot of observation, so you'll get a lot of practice with your observational skills. We're going to use a 3D system in lab to help you, since we won't be necessarily in the lab, but lots and lots and lots of just observation, right? Observational skills are incredibly important in the healthcare field. You have to be able to keep an eye on your patients and know when things change for kind of good or ill, and so practicing those observational skills is quite important. It is also a lot of terminology. We are going to dump a ton of terminology on you guys, especially in the first week of class, so just be prepared and kind of buckle down and just practice with it. And there is a lot of memorization. This is a very content-heavy semester. You're doing it in, like half the time because it's a summer semester. So there will be a lot of memorization, and there isn't like an easy way. It's just practice, 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 practice. The other half of the class is the physiology of the body, which is really more about the function of the body, how the body functions. So not just what the lungs look like, but also what the lungs do. Not just what the heart looks like and describing the different 4 chambers of the heart, but how those chambers of the heart work together to pump the blood through your body. So it's a little bit more abstract than kind of just hard anatomy and requires a little bit of a different skill set. Typically in this class we will base our study of physiology on organ systems. So we'll look at the cardiovascular system, we'll look at the endocrine system, we'll look at the urinary system, and kind of cover both the A and the P, the anatomy and the physiology. But when you get into your upper level classes, they tend to pull from multiple organ systems. And so you need a really good foundational knowledge of human A&P in terms of just the kind of how the body functions, so that when you get to those upper level classes and they start throwing you how the body malfunctions, you have a foundation upon which you know that those malfunctions are based on. So, as I mentioned, different skill set, a little more abstract than the anatomy. It's really not as much about can you describe what something is, but more can you describe how something is doing what it is. So it's a lot more relationships, multiple focus levels, taking details, relating them to the big picture, looking at the big picture, relating to down to those details, knowing basic physical and chemical properties and how those basic properties apply to the study of biology. So it's a little more abstract. Students, if they have problems that aren't just sheer amount of content, this is where they typically will have problems, is understanding the physiology, because there's a lot more comprehension and application, a little less can you just describe for me what this thing is. That's the A part. But we do study both of them together. We study the anatomy and the physiology. And this reflects one of our guiding principles of studying anatomy and physiology, and it's called the principle of complementarity. Essentially what this means is that what something looks like tells you a whole lot of information about what it does, and what something does reflects how it is composed, what its structure is. So the function of the organ or the function of the body part is always going to reflect its structure. Your teeth are a really great example. You have three different types of teeth. You have incisors, you have which have kind of these nice kind of crisp edges. You have these kind of flat surfaces in your molars and your premolars, and you have these sharp canine teeth. Well, the incisor teeth, with their kind of sharp, crisp edges, are more like scissors. So they're really good at like cutting our food. The flat surfaces on our molars are really good about grinding our food. And then the sharp canines are more about kind of tearing and ripping, particularly like meat, right? So our different teeth and their different shapes reflect how they can function to help us chew our food. A canine tooth with its really, really sharp, pointy edges, that's not going to be really good for kind of grinding lettuce, but those nice flat molars can grind really well. A shorthand way of looking at the principle of complementarity is that structure equals function, or form fits function. And everything that we look at in anatomy and physiology is dependent on this principle. It's definitely one of the things that kind of girds all of what we learn in anatomy and physiology. Another really good example is your lungs. So the primary function of your lungs is to take in oxygen, release carbon dioxide. So it's an exchange of these two small little gases. Well, would you want that exchange? Do you think that exchange is going to take place if the walls of your lungs were really thick or really thin? A thin wall makes more sense because the gas is easier to move from one kind of compartment to the next. So that's another kind of really easy visual example for you guys. Or you can just look at smile at yourself in the mirror and look at all your crazy teeth. This is the biological hierarchy. And it is kind of a roadmap of where we are going with this chapter and with all of our chapters, actually. So we start at the basic atomical level. That's the basic stuff of matter, which is what we are, matter. So that's chapter 2. When we combine molecules, then we are in the cellular level. And when we combine cells of the same type, we are at the tissue level. So that's chapter 3 and then chapter 4. If we have multiple types of tissues coming together, then we have an organ, like this blood vessel here. And if we have multiple organs coming together to cooperate to carry out some sort of function, then we have an organ system. And then when we get multiple organ systems kind of cooperating together, we have an organ system, a whole organism. And if we have multiple organisms working together, then we have a college campus or a town or a city. And if we have multiple different types of species, then we have, different ecological kind of parts of the planet. And we can go even further out to the whole planet itself. But we spend most of our time right here at the organ and organ system level. So we'll cover the chemical level in chapter 2, the cellular level in chapter 3, the tissue level in chapter 4, and then chapter 5 until the end will be the different organs and the organ systems. Now, we are multicellular beings. We don't just have one single cell. We do have multiple types of organs. We have multiple types of organ systems, and we require all of them to kind of cooperate together and to work together in order for us to live and to thrive. So we need the lungs to take in the oxygen, the heart to pump the blood, which contains the oxygen, out to the tissues, which will use the oxygen, and in doing so, create some sort of waste product, which then has to be filtered out by the kidneys. And in order for all of these body organs to have enough energy to do all of the things that they do, we need to take in nutrients through our digestive system. And so it is really a very kind of interdependent, kind of multifunctional, kind of multi-cooperational organism that we human beings are. We do have 11 different organ systems. What you all will need to know at this point in time about our 11 organ systems are the primary functions and kind of primary organs of each system. So there's a very nice figure in your book. Looks like this one. It highlights each of the kind of primary organs of the various systems. So for instance, for the integumentary system, we're talking about your skin and hair and nails. And then under each picture is a little blurb about what each system does for us. So that is something that you will definitely want to review. So you can see reproductive system, urinary system, digestive, respiratory, lymphatic and immune, cardiovascular, endocrine. All of that will be covered in A&P 2. In A&P 1, we will do the nervous system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, and the integumentary system, because we have some of that basic kind of underlying biology to cover as well. So you definitely want to make sure that you check out this figure in your book and have a basic kind of understanding of why we have each of these 11 organ systems, as well as what some of kind of the main organs are of each of these systems.